We thank you for this day, Lord. Thank you for this opportunity, and whenever we stand before your people, it's more than just words. It's a chance to touch the heart of man for the glory of God. Amen. A wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be here. And I want to begin by thanking the committee for selecting me. I was very surprised when I was called by Sister Willie Mae Baldwin and asked if I would do this. And I thought, well, I know they had Reverend John Warren last year. It's kind of hard following Reverend Warren, so. But I thought, oh, well, if he can do it, I can do it. But I do want to thank the East Cleveland Community Center's MLK Memorial Luncheon Committee for this august and this humbling opportunity to serve as your keynote speaker for this year. Surely for any African American of my age group, whether male or female, to be asked and stand and proclaim a word of hope for a nation in turmoil and in memory of that great drum major for justice, Dr. Martin Luther King, is truly an honor and a privilege, and it's one that I don't take lightly. Dr. King, as we know, was a man who lived out the words of the scriptures that says, a true friend is willing to lay down his life for his friends. And knowing that he could be killed any day by an assassin's bullet, he still continued to speak out about injustice anywhere and inequality in this country. He sensed, you see, a greater calling than his personal comforts. And yet, like us, he was a man concerned about his family, concerned about the security and safety of those that he loved dearly, but he lived out his faith and his belief that if he would do God's will, God would be faithful in providing for those things concerning him. So he left more for us than just a legacy of love and a legacy of seeking equality. He left for us a legacy that says if we are willing to give our lives to that passion, that dream, that calling that is within us, that God will help us every step of the way. And he'll provide those things we cannot provide ourselves. This year, the students in the MLK oratorical contest in Dallas were asked to respond to the question, what would Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say if he were running for president? And I seriously pondered that question, and I decided I would focus on it briefly for today's remarks to try to put into some perspective what he would say had he been a member of last night's debate, or had he been a member of last week's debate. What are some of the things he would say? And I've developed several personal theories of what I think Dr. King would say. But I only did it after a careful study of his sermons, one of which Mrs. Ceremony very well explained his sermon on love, loving your enemies. Beautiful sermon. But using as a reference a Knock at Midnight, the inspirational great sermons of Dr. Martin Luther King that was compiled by Time Warner, I've drawn some conclusions that might likely be his campaign platform. Everybody has to have a platform if you're a politician. And everybody should have a platform for your life. What do you stand for? What are you all about? I saw once where in a rehab program, the people were asked to write your own epitaph. What do you think people would say about you at your own funeral? And you know, that in itself is an humbling experience. And then they were asked to write down, what would you have people say about you at your own funeral? And of course, we don't know any results from any of those people who are still living. But it does tell us how amazing it is that we can sometimes think a bit more highly of ourselves than other people might think. And what we think they might say might just be the opposite of what they would say. So it might be an interesting task if some of us would do that. Just write out your epitaph, your obituary of what you think people will say about you and run it by a few family members. See if they agree with your assessment of yourself. And you might want to start changing some things right now. But anyway, in this year's campaign, there's a slogan that says, "Let's make America great again." One of the candidates. And I think Dr. King would have found himself just a little puzzled by the meaning of making America great again. And I too am a little puzzled by that slogan. Because you see, I have always seen America as being great. In fact, I firmly believe that America is the greatest nation in the world. A land of opportunity where a people enchained and shackled, impoverished and disenfranchised can break the chains and be elected to the highest office in the land. A place where the ancestors who built the house, now called the White House, never expected to occupy. Slavery began in this country in 1607 when the English settled in Virginia. And it took 402 years for the color of the slave to become the color of the president of this nation. God, our God, seems to be a right on time God. And he does things when he wants to and how he wants to. This is a land where seasonal migrant workers whose children could never dream of going to school because of the harshness of having to move from place to pick grapes and other crops on very low wages, could organize a successful strike against the great growers in California under the leadership of a Mexican-American laborer whose name was Cesar Chavez. Stressing nonviolent methods, Chavez drew attention for his cause using boycotts, marches, and even hunger strikes. He was able, a Mexican-American in this country, this great country, to secure raises and improve conditions for farm workers in California, Texas, Arizona, and Florida. This is a great country. This is a country where change can happen no matter who you are, when you believe and work together. None of these things could have been done by any group by themselves. It takes togetherness, and that's what it's going to take to make America greater. America is a land where Dr. A. Philip Randolph in 1925 became the organizer of a group of men, a union called the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. This was an overwhelmingly black group of men, lovingly referred to as 100 Men Named George. And everybody's name was George because there was no respect, no recognition of them as persons, just a porter whose work was to do what they were told to do. But he struggled so that they would have some respect, and not only that, the dignity of a porter's contract, which they landed by his persistence and his working together. America is a land where one group of people who said enough is enough and boycotted the buses in Montgomery, Alabama for a whole year and changed the laws of that city concerning segregation. This is a great country. We don't need to make it great again. It's already great. We just got to recognize our greatness and be determined to make it greater. A land where Japanese Americans, despite being placed in concentration camps in this country, still stood and pledged allegiance to the flag of the United States. By fighting a country for a country and in a war who disrespected them, called them Japs, and yet they stood anyway. This land being their land. A land where Native Americans joined hands during a time of poverty, starvation, and harsh winters. And we call it our first Thanksgiving as they worked together as Native Americans helped to feed those who would have starved otherwise. And those same ones who joined hands with them stole their land, placed them on reservations, defamed their cultural heritage of great chiefs such as Sitting Bull, Geronimo, Chief Joseph, and Quanah Parker to get closer to Texas. Yet they stand proud to be an American. This is a great land. So I'm just a little puzzled about the need to make America great again. Just a little puzzled. I wondered if it means that we need to take America back to where it used to be. Back to a time before Dr. King dreamed his dream for this country. A time when greatness was defined by a small group of Americans who just happened to be the major beneficiaries of that greatness. A time when the greatest nation on earth was being built on the back of coal miners, cotton pickers, migrant workers, and the horrible system that grew out of the black codes known as convict leasing. Do we want to go back where those who profited from all of these harsh realities were the ones who reaped the benefits of greatness in this country? What do we mean, let's make America great again? America is great. This system of leasing out state convicts who were mainly black was a leasing to private corporations who had access to almost free labor. After our country allowed us to abolish slavery, we still, the Southern elites, the big corporations, still found a way to get labor that was free from those that they desired to enchain and enslave. There's a great book called Slavery by Another Name. We can't go back. We can't afford to go back. We can't even think about going back. We've come too far to turn around now. We are a blessed people. We are a people who have worked together. We've sung together. We've cried together. And we've done it all races, all genders, black, white, men, women, other races. We built this country. And so the elites then would say, let's make America great again, because the again benefits them. And yet, I think Dr. King on his platform would respond with these words from the speech that we heard earlier, portions of it, loving your enemies, when he said, democracy is still the greatest form of government that man has ever conceived. But the weakness is we don't touch it. We know what democracy is, but we play around with it. Isn't it true that we have often taken the necessities from the masses to give luxuries to the classes? Isn't it true that we have often in our democracy trampled over individuals and races with an iron foot of oppression? That's what he would say, I firmly believe, from his writings in his campaign. I think Dr. King would say, no, we cannot afford to make America great again just for the wealthy elitists. Quoting from his letter from a Birmingham jail, he would say to us, lamentably, it is a historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privilege voluntarily. We have to have a conscience where we work together and fight together in order to make everything equal for everybody. But now is the time, he said, now is the time, and these words ring true today. Now is the time to lift up our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity. We can do it, and if ever it needed to be done in this country, it still needs to be done today. Racial injustice still exists, but we don't have to allow it to exist. When machines and computers and profit motives and big giant financial institutions and banks, all of those are considered more important than people. And here is any peoples without power, without elitists, those who had their homes taken by foreclosure from unjust and unjust laws dealing with financial institutions. Those who are still standing in lines waiting for a welfare check. And believe it or not, there are those who are not able in this country to care for themselves. But when they apply for welfare, they're just $2 over the roof. And they can't get it, so they go back to living $2. $1. You just made $1 too much this year, and you don't qualify. And they go back to poverty. and yet we do nothing, we say nothing. We still feel that this socialist government gives away too much money on social programs. What about the love and the heart of people in need? Isn't that more important to us than our politics? More important to us than what we think, what we develop about one party's ideas, conservative, and another party's ideas, too liberal? What about the people? What's being done to help the people? But what about now? What about now? What has happened to America since Dr. King's dream? What would his platform be? What would he say about the multiple police killings across this country of unarmed black males, children, and youth? What would he say about those decent and dedicated police officers who risk their own lives every day to sincerely protect and serve the American public? Well, Dr. King expressed in his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, and this would be his platform: I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daylight of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. Now, Dr. King talked in words where some of us would have to interpret, because he was an intelligent man. And when he spoke, the fervor that he had, even if you didn't understand what he was saying, you felt it. But we have to go back and analyze what he is saying. His platform here is that he just refuses to believe in this country that we would allow the darkness that racism brings and covers us with to hide from us the beauty and the peace of living together in brotherhood. You see, Dr. King saw, as I see, that America is still great, despite its past problems, its attitudes, its prejudice, and its history. This is still a great nation. We don't need to go back to make America great. America is already great. We must, however, continue to be mindful of those issues and those events that would deter and hinder our greatness. We must be willing, as a nation of people, not a race of people, as a nation of people, to fight injustice and brutality, no matter where it occurs and no matter who does it. We must speak out when a policeman is killed simply for being a policeman or a policewoman. By the same token, we must speak out against brutality where a young 12-year-old is shot for having a toy gun within 2 seconds of the police coming up. Or a college student is shot 14 times. Overkill. We must speak out on both sides of the issue. But then fear is one of the biggest enemies we face now as a nation. And Dr. King, in one of his speeches, gave us several antidotes for fear. I think that would be a part of his campaign. He does not promote the eradication of all human fear, for some fears are necessary for creation and innovation, but he did encourage the elimination of unfounded fears. And many of our campaign slogans and campaign speeches right now are founded on fear, on creating fear within the country, fear within a nation. And fear is still the biggest weapon that continues to separate us. But God is far greater than our fears and our prejudices. And as a nation founded on Christian principles, we must believe that God is still on the throne. God is still in control. We don't have to fear one another. We just have to give it a little knee power. Get on your knees again. And how beautiful it is and would be if we could all, in a rainbow of colors as this room now has, pray together and get together, bombard heaven, and stop some of the fears that now run rampant in this country. Not only that, God knows that since 9/11, Americans have become and remain terrified of people with Muslim-sounding names. Now that's a reality. You know, they have all these reality shows now where they don't cover up stuff. And we've got to stop covering up. And remaining terrified of Muslim-sounding names is not just among one race or another race of people. Because of all the happenings over the world, and because of what is happening in our own country, we have gotten to the point where we're going back and beginning to isolate, to separate with another whole race and group of people. And God is not in the business of separating. God takes a black man from Kenya, unknown to whites and blacks in America. Then he takes a white woman from Wichita, Kansas, who had no great American name connections or wealth. And from these two comes a child named Barack Hussein Obama. What I'm saying is, with a name like that, Barack Obama would never have been elected in this country if the hand of God had not been in it. That shows you what God can do. God can take away our fears. He can take away our prejudices and give us hopes and dreams and put those things in the most unlikely of persons. We've got to get back to the throne of God. What has been at the heart of racism for many white males is the fear of competition from black men and women, and especially black men for their women. Now, we're going to keep it real here today. This is reality. Because if we don't face it, we can't fix it. It's a fear that caused a deep separation. Hangings, murders. Emmett Till was a perfect example. Just a young man having no idea of what was about to be done to him because he grew up in the North, came south, talking about his white girlfriend and spoke to just a white teenager and was put on the wheel of a windmill, only for speaking. It was fear that caused it. I don't believe it was done just because he was a black youth. It was the fear perpetuated in our country. And we cannot allow that kind of fear to still run around and exist in our country. And not only that, they were scared that black men would have relations, interracial relations with their white women. And so this whole thing of Jim Crow laws was established. But it didn't stop it. We have just as many or more interracial relations today and interracial marriages than this country has ever had. Fear did not stop it, and fear will not stop when anything that God has already put into motion. So we've got to understand, fear simply divides us and it keeps us from reaching our highest potential. But America, although it is a great nation, can become greater. Dr. King reminded us in his sermon, our God is marching on, that the battle is in our hands. It's in our hands. And we can answer with nonviolence the call to a higher ground, or we can return and go back to things where some are privileged and others are not. He challenged us, though, that together we got to march to the ballot boxes until we send to our city councils, our state legislatures, and the United States men and women who do not fear, who are not afraid to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with their God. He has challenged us by reminding us that the attitude of fear destroys the very soul of our culture. It destroys our nation. The thing that we need in this world today is a group of men and women, elected and not elected, who will stand up for what is right and oppose what is wrong, wherever it may be. A group of people who have come to see that some things are wrong, even if you get away with it, they're wrong. Some things are right, whether anybody else sees you doing them or not. They're right. And so we're reminded then that we must consider whether our country can remain great and still become greater than we are. Can we remain a great country? I think would be his platform. If we turn our nation into a land where open and concealed carrying of guns speaks for our fears and our hate. Can we remain a great nation when we no longer have to communicate and sit around the table and negotiate? All we have to do is pick up a gun and let the gun do the talking for us. And in some cases, even bullying. I think Dr. King would say, no, no. That is not the way we will remain great. Your vision becomes distorted when you hate. You can't stand upright when you hate. And he reminds us that is why Jesus said, you must love and not hate. That's not easy to do, because we know in this world there are other countries that are using terrorism in our world to kill thousands, millions of innocent people. What do you do about that? What would Dr. King's platform be about the terrorism, about the hate? Well, he told a story in one of his sermons about a drive that he took, and many of you probably heard this, with his brother, A.D. He says, my brother, A.D., and I were driving one evening to Chattanooga, Tennessee from Atlanta. A.D. was driving the car. And for some reason that night, all the drivers were very discourteous and they wouldn't dim their lights. Hardly any driver that passed by us would dim their light. And he says, I remember very vividly, my brother A.D. looked over, and in a tone of anger, he said, I know what I'm going to do. The next car that comes along here and refuses to dim their lights, I'm not going to dim mine either. And he said he looked right back at him really quick and said, oh, no, don't do that. If you do that, there'll be too much light on this highway. And we'll all end up in destruction. Somebody on this highway has got to have some sense. And I believe that's what his platform would be to the world, to this civilization. Somebody has got to have some sense.
Amen.
Somebody has got to dim the lights. We can't all refuse to dim the lights. We can't all refuse to go at each other and to fight to the end. The old Wild West days, the duel at noonday. Somebody's got to have some sense. And I think that his platform would be that we must have enough sense and morality to cut off the chains of hate and the chain of evil in this world. And you do that by love. Everyone's not going to agree on how we handle the terrorists. Some are going to say, isolate them. That's just like a thief breaking in your house. You can put bars all around it, but if they want to get in, they're going to get in. And so that may not necessarily be a solution. We can say, kill them all before they kill us. But how do we know that the nations who say they were on our side might not change sides if the other group, their enemy, looks a little stronger?